Good afternoon. I hope you all had a great lunch and are ready for the afternoon session. So welcome to this afternoon session. And if you forgot, today is Wednesday, the 10th of September. I said the wrong day yesterday, so I've synced up. I think I'm in the right day now. All right. So this session is titled, I think it's up on the board. Yes, you can see. And for those of you online, if you can't see, From Paywalls to Pathways, Reimagining Interlibrary Loan Access for HBCUs and Tribal Libraries. Our presenter, who in the room we can see up on the screens, is Garrett Griffith. And we welcome our online viewers in the virtual world out there. And we have one person walking in, so we'll wait for her to have a great seat. You're fine. No, we're not trying to call you out or anything. We just want to be respectful to you too. And I'm going to turn it over to Garrett, but before I do, I have to say a few more things. We will take Q&A at the end of the session, and we'll do alternate some questions in the room and online. And I have a great team over here to help me with tech support and microphone runners. We ask you please at the end of the session to please fill out the survey, the feedback survey, which helps both us organizers, but also gives some great feedback to our presenters. And they really like it if they're going up for promotion or tenure too. So it'll go in their dossier. So, and I think that's about all I have to say. Are we still doing the survey overall into the drawing later, or am I using an old script? Okay. What am I supposed to tell them about that?
It happens at the end.
Okay.
It'll pop up with a QR code that they can just scan to fill out the survey.
Right. You heard that from her, I hope.
Well, go ahead and repeat what she said. It's not.
I got the old script. I got a bad script. Sorry.
Just say what she said. So in the microphone. In the microphone. That works too.
Just to let everybody know, just like every session here at NWILL, there will be a post-session survey that we will give you the QR code to scan at the end of today's seminar. I forgot the word, session, whatever it is. Please fill it out. You're also going to find that QR code in the session description on Whova. Thank you.
Thank you. It makes me think. I always mix up and forget some part of this. But as my son always says, you meant well, Mom. So let's turn it over to Griffith. I mean, Garrett, not even Griffith. All right. Too many cookies. Too many cookies.
All right. Hello. Thanks for joining me today. This presentation is on reimagining interlibrary loan access for historically Black colleges and universities and tribal libraries. My name is Garrett Griffith, and I'm the head of resource sharing for Indiana University Libraries at Indiana University Bloomington. I'm an assistant librarian and over our document delivery services department, which includes a lot of different services centered around the borrowing and lending of materials. So for a little background about our institution, IU Bloomington is a public research university classified as R1, so doctoral university with a very high research activity. Between undergraduates and graduates, we have around 48,000 students and roughly 10,000 staff and faculty. All of that to say, our department is kept busy throughout the year, fulfilling upwards of 30,000 requests per year, so a healthy high volume. The department is myself as head, borrowing supervisor who has 2 full-time staff and around 5 students reporting to them, and then the lending supervisor with 2 full-time staff and roughly 7 students reporting to them. So it's a rather balanced department across the 2 sides in both staffing and the number of requests fulfilled. There's an ebb and flow there, but generally the 2 sides remain comparable year in and year out. So I know there's a lot of different types of institutions with different resource allocations represented at NWILL. So I thought it important to provide some insight on what we are working with at Indiana University Bloomington. Not that you need to be the size of our institution to implement all or any aspects of this project for yourself. Did it go to the next slide? Yeah. So here's our agenda and key topics for today. We will walk through all the key aspects of how we implemented this project at our institution, from where the initial idea came from to where we would like to make further improvements in the future. This includes everything from reviewing historical data and advocating for the project to leadership, to adopting a new policy and developing a sustainable workflow to better provide access to our materials for HBCUs and tribal libraries. I'll I'll share some of the ideas we considered, how we move through each of the phases for implementation, and we'll cover the technical side, such as routing rules, billing exemptions, and queue managements. We'll also cover the human elements, so leadership buy-in, staff training, building relationships with new partner institutions. By the end of the session, you should have a solid framework of how to approach a similar initiative for your own workplace. We all have different interlibrary loan systems, different budgets, different institutional cultures, but this project is built with simplicity in mind, and it takes as direct of an approach as we could find while still being thorough and sustainable. My goal is for you to leave here with concrete tools, whether that is email templates, routing logic, advocacy strategies, or just a clear sense of what is possible. And feel free to take what works for your institution and adapt it to improve access to your own collections with communities you would like to better serve. So why this project? We were inspired by the groundwork that Clemson University Libraries had established last year. So a business card came across my desk it was after the 2024 ALA conference last summer with a link to Clemson's working document for providing free loans to tribal libraries. And it piqued my interest, but it wasn't something I could engage with at the moment due to time constraints. So fast forward a year, and I was able to carve out some time over the summer to make something happen. So one of the things I like to focus on is identifying where our services aren't reaching and why. So expanding to access to the material is a big priority for me. We invest heavily in space and staffing, preservation, technology for people to utilize the collections for the research. And the question starts to become, are we moving in a direction that opens that access to as many people as possible as our investments and our finances allow? And are we overlooking people? So I know frequently we look toward the bigger buckets, how to move the biggest numbers for a thing, mostly just for return on time investment, which is fine. It's reality born of limitations. But for me on this one, I wanted to look at some of the areas that are deserving of attention that may be missed otherwise. Clemson has built a list of, I think, roughly 275 plus tribal libraries. I tried to count, I keep losing count. And they're aggregated from a few different sources. I'm not sure if it's a complete list, but it feels pretty comprehensive, and it's a really good starting point. So I've included their contact information on the slide as well. The document contains a list of lenders and their contact information who have already agreed to lend freely to tribal libraries. There's also a list of tribal libraries by state, including links and symbols when available. This project builds on their efforts, expanding access to HBCUs and potentially others down the road, and attempts to more directly establish relationships and accounts with these libraries in a more proactive manner. So we'll also walk through some of the different considerations concerning staffing and tech implementations and budgeting. We realized when we started this that the cost barrier isn't just the lending fee, but the return shipping cost as well. Our goal here is pretty straightforward for the project. We want to provide free interlibrary loan services and improved access support to less resourced institutions, beginning with tribal libraries and HBCUs. We looked over the last 5 fiscal years and pulled data to see how many of these libraries borrowed from us, how many times, how much money was earned from lending to these libraries, if requests were not fulfilled, what was the reason. The money earned per request fulfilled is not really a factor for us determining how we build our services. Interlibrary loans it's not a money generator, and invoicing a library tends to cost us more to process than the initial invoice charge. So something to the tune of like 2 to 3 times what we charge as the invoice is what makes its way through all the different units across campus. We spend way more money just to process it. The data was collected by looking over our records in ILLiad, performing a department email review, and in reviewing that data, we noted that tribal libraries and historically Black colleges and universities have utilized our services in a very limited capacity, particularly tribal libraries. Certain HBCUs utilize our services semi-regularly, but many have just never borrowed from Indiana University, or if they have, they haven't done so in many years. For perspective, I only was able to identify 10 tribal libraries that had attempted to borrow from us, with half of those not resulting in a loan due to cost barriers specifically. For HBCUs, the majority did not have accounts with us, and those that do have accounts had requested between 1 to 5 items over the last 5 years. We also reviewed data to ensure staff will have the capacity for any potential influx of new requests. So while I'm not expecting a big increase here, more of a steady small increase over the course of the next year, this was a good opportunity to see how we are doing allocating staff time per request alongside other duties within the collection management department. So making the pitch to leadership up the chain was relatively painless compared to other projects. For this one, at least, we discussed it with our Director of Collection Strategies and Management, our Associate Dean for Collection Development, and our Assistant Dean over Administration and Finance. While the total cost is an unknowable, at the start, we didn't know fully what the request demand would be. We determined that the changeover would not cause us any financial issues in terms of waiving lending fees. Again, it tends to cost us more money to charge than not, at least for invoicing. Going into the conversation, we also had the benefit of being known as a fiscally responsible unit that cuts when it makes sense to release funds back to the libraries. And we've done so over the last 2 fiscal years that I've been head of interlibrary loan at IU. We also don't have excessive cost, right? So our equipment costs are low. We've been using the same scanners for 15 years. They'll need to be upgraded soon, but still. We also don't have a lot of staff turnover. So it means we don't generate additional costs as new staff learn the ropes for processing requests in a cost-effective manner. We're mostly a manual department. A lot of our processes and workflows tend to have a lot of manual review in them. Other factors to note, the libraries will be contacted on a rolling basis in small batches, and we will assess the demand as we go. The project is utilizing existing infrastructure and methods, so processes that have already been refined from working on other things. This has the side benefit of creating less friction for my team as well, so they're already accustomed to similar processes in other parts of their daily work. Our first practical change is to modify the policies, right? So for these libraries, that means removing lending fees, making sure we pay for return shipping cost. Our standard lending fee is $17 for interlibrary loan fee management, so IFM, and $20 for invoicing. It's easier to make the case for removing that barrier as the revenue generated doesn't have a great impact for the libraries as a whole, though it can be a bit more challenging when you're using money outside of your unit to ensure free return shipping. And the question became, can we offer free return shipping? For us, the answer is yes, for now. So we have some headroom in our shipping budget, but not everyone will. And we're actively experiencing cuts, as many other institutions across the US are. So it's an unknowable going into next fiscal year, but for now, we're able to do it, so we're going to do it. The average cost for shipping a 1-pound book via UPS for us has been around $10, sometimes less, but 10's the average, 11 for a 2-pound book as well, so give or take. The policy change impacts all HBCUs and tribal libraries going forward. So as we reach out to libraries, as they request from us or they reach out to us directly, we will just enact this policy and inform our patrons of the pilot program. It is important to note that these are not reciprocal agreements. So reciprocal agreements are one way to do resource sharing. But IU historically only enters into agreements at the state level or at the Big Ten Academic Alliance consortia level. There are some outliers, but generally that's how we do it. Also, it would defeat the point here, right? So for these libraries, cost is directly prohibiting access. We aren't typically borrowing materials from these institutions. Sometimes we are, but we're instead focusing on an outreach approach to better facilitate access to our own collections. So if we are borrowing from them, we're paying for it. For technical implementation, we wanted to avoid adding unnecessary complexity on top of all of our other processes, especially for something that potentially won't generate daily requests. We created a custom library group that will contain all the tribal libraries and HBCUs that establish accounts with us. Side note, it automatically assigned group 42. So for Hitchhiker's Guide, I loved it because I really liked it. With naming, it can be a bit of a challenge, right? We needed something that matched our current naming conventions, that was concise, professional, and descriptive enough to make sense to staff internally. We also needed it to be flexible enough to grow beyond the initial library types we're piloting. So it saves us time from having to reconfigure things later. We have decided on access support as the name. out of a desire to focus on access limitations as opposed to resources or institutional status. And it should scale well for future participants as well. So our queues and everything in our library groups are named access support. Requests from the access support library group, they route through a custom queue to ensure we provide additional support for these libraries. The new queue helps with visual separation when staff are processing, ensures we don't mistakenly charge the libraries. Our big fear here was to accidentally charge a library once, and maybe it would deter them from coming back. If we did it a second time, for sure, they wouldn't want to attempt to use our services. So we really wanted to avoid any kind of mistakes in processing. Yeah, our routing rules pictured here. It's simple. There could be a better approach, but it works. So the request routes to a custom queue if the library is in the access support library group, and then the staff take it from there. And finally, for billing, we manually adjust each address book entry as we add them to the library group. So article and loan billing are set to exempt in our system. It's as simple as that for us. Our department leans more toward manual processing review, as I mentioned earlier. So we have less than 25, 26 routing rules. Most of our automation is just related to our consortium membership, so the Big Ten Academic Alliance. As we build out new projects, staff tend to prefer things to route in a less complex way. So we've continued that trend with this project. Okay, so this is the most text-heavy slide just because the email template that's here. So one of our outreach email templates is here. The other one's not pictured, but it's nothing special. It's just informative. It's helpful to have on hand. You know, feel free to use it as a foundation for your own communication as a launching point. It's a bit of a text blog, but it begins briefly with explaining the new pilot program. It breaks down the 3 main takeaways via bullet points. So no lending fees, return shipping covered by our library, and that we provide assistance with account creation. We also note that this is exploring the long-term sustainability of this approach based on demand. We don't want to overpromise because our libraries, you know, the budget's actively changing. So, and it's not for the better. The email template is also included in the slide notes for better access. So it should be available to people to just copy and paste. We have a link also that's not listed here, but it leads to our registration web form. Form's basic, it gathers basic information like institution name, contact name, email address, address, city, state, zip code, and then whether or not they have an OCLC symbol. So super basic, super straightforward, but it just helps us gather some preliminary information. Ideally, we get an email for the contact that goes to a group account rather than the individual staff member, as we are unable to communicate through ILLIAD or OCLC with web client folks right now. So group accounts are better for more reliable communication, and we don't want to lose contact if one person's no longer with that institution. We also have an email template concerning return postage. So we had considered providing return postage in the initial shipment, but with long periods, like long loan periods, renewals, we decided to communicate that they can reach out to us for a digital return label when they are ready. It's not posted here due to space constraints, but it essentially states that we will provide prepaid return shipping at no cost to their library. And when they're ready to receive a digital return shipping label, they can email our department with the title of the items being returned and then the weight of the return postage. We do a similar thing for our Books by Mail program. So that's where we are loaning material across the US to our own affiliates. And, you know, they have very gracious loan periods. So it's best to kind of let them let us know when they want to return certain items. Our lending supervisor serves as the main contact point for these libraries, and they work with them to finalize account creation. So as the libraries reach out to us, we establish an account in ILLIAD, and then we establish another account in Workflows to help us track what material is being checked out where. So ILLIAD's to process the request. Workflows is our client-side software for Cersei Dynamic Symphony. So that's our integrated library system. And our process here is to assign a 4-digit number as a symbol for institutions lacking an OCLC symbol. We have a spreadsheet with the most recently used value in our web client, and then we just increase the count by 1 for each new member added to the address book. So super simple there. We then assign the library to the access support group. We set the billing to exempt, and then when a request comes through, the routing logic takes over. It routes to the custom queue, and then staff process it like any other request, unless something flags as needing more attention or support, or somebody's emailed about it. And finally, we have standardized documentation that includes the new process for training staff. Some of it's what's included in these slides and across this presentation, and then it's some copy and paste from similar queue routing and processing that we have. So nothing that will throw staff, you know. Outreach and advertising. So tracking down contact information for nearly 400 institutions is super challenging. We haven't completed this step fully as we are taking an overtime approach. For HBCUs, we are hoping it will be relatively straightforward to find ILL information. Hasn't been the case so far. Some things are easy, some things a little bit more difficult. Some HBCUs already have accounts with us, so we just reach out to them to provide notice of the pilot, and then we adjust the account settings for them, which just involves ticking a box to place them in the appropriate access support group and then ensuring that the billing's set to exempt. For tribal libraries, things are more challenging. So we've considered having students comb through sites for contact information during downtimes. The plan has been to get what we can contact-wise, build out the email templates with relevant information, and then either set up a mass email for notifications or just do it in phases. I'd recommend phases generally. You can more easily handle the emails bouncing back your way. The time it takes to create 2 accounts per library is more manageable as well. And you can kind of see how the demand ramps up after the initial account creation. Email templates are handy. They just ease the burden of reaching out to individual libraries and ensure the messaging is consistent across all staff members with all the necessary information. So you reach out, in our case, they register through the web form we provide, and then we correspond with them over email and establish the relationship. Another consideration for us, we didn't want to make nearly 400 accounts for our system and then only have 10% of them use our services. We've instead opted to gather the contact information, directly reach out in phases. Is this of interest to you? Do you want to make an account with us now and begin borrowing material from our collections? This also values our staff time, right? We can create these accounts as they come in without committing too much time, since we are adding accounts as the libraries respond to us. It tends to be heavier at the beginning of the semester and then kind of dips and comes back. So we also added our contact information to Clemson's working document mentioned earlier. So in an ideal world, the tribal libraries are aware of the document. They remember to check the document. I would have loved to add us sooner, but I wanted to have a solid workflow in place and needed time to better learn our systems. I was still pretty fresh in the position last summer. But there are certain limitations with our approach and Clemson's, right? I believe around 8 institutions across 4 states and the District of Columbia have added their contact information, maybe a little bit more now. But the list has largely looked the same since it hit my desk last summer after the ALA conference. Time tends to bury these documents behind the next 50 documents, which is unfortunate, right? Or people leave, they get busy, the list doesn't resurface enough to maintain relevance over time. Still, you know, it's great to have the document available to reference for the lender and the borrower, and I'm super grateful for Clemson's efforts here. Hopefully this presentation draws some new eyes on it, reminds people of its existence. I found it very helpful, but it needs a lot of work to just fill out more contact information for the tribal libraries. My approach has been, you know, to leverage it for the tribal libraries, expand to include HBCUs, be proactive with the outreach email campaign with the hope that we can discover enough contact information for the libraries. It's really nice not to have to start from scratch on something. And so their document became the foundation from which we could build. As for expectations, so we're anticipating a small increase in requests from these libraries. I think the tribal libraries will have lower demand, mostly given the difficulty in reaching them. And, you know, they probably just have a lesser ILL demand in comparison to HBCUs. I know some of the HBCUs that we regularly serve have already been thrilled with the changes. So I'm expecting some increases from them to be a little bit heavier as they lean more on our services. Though we do want the numbers to increase in a healthy and manageable way. So we're just going to continue to monitor as we go and assess. Also, this project is a good test case for us. We have considered going free for everyone in terms of waiving lending fees. But if we ever do go down that road, we need to slowly open the gates. Some data I've looked through indicates, like the invoice thing, we're paying more than we should to do, to process a charge. And the bigger the institution, the bigger the organization, the more the red tape, and things can start to not make sense of why you're doing what you're doing or charging what you're charging. And, for now, they're remaining in place so as not to overwhelm our staff, right? Our department. We don't want to be inundated with more than we can reasonably handle. And I definitely don't want my staff to be at max capacity for any sustained period of time. But this project allows us to experiment a bit, as an experiment in a way that's more controlled, right? And then expand as resources allow. So free access to certain institutions that hit certain parameters, and then slowly expanding that circle to include others. The end result would be more accessible collections for the research community, but also ensures our numbers remain strong into the future. So the project is very new for us. It was implemented over the summer semester. So to better measure its effectiveness and improve outreach and service over time, we're going to do periodic data reviews. So the initial 6 months will be the first major milestone, and we'll collect data over time after the launch to gauge interest across libraries. We'll examine the number of requests, the shipping cost, just generally see how the pilot is going, and also what types of material they're interested in. Is this increasing access to our collections? Are the shipping costs manageable? Are they sustainable in the long term, given whatever the current demand is? Since the initial pilots, including almost 400 libraries, some of whom we've loaned to in the past, but haven't utilized our resources or haven't done so or they have done so, but in such a small capacity to date that we don't really know what the borrowing rate's going to be. The new policy and the data review will help us kind of suss that out in the next 6 months, and then hopefully within the year, right? I also plan on doing staff check-ins, so checking in with staff throughout the first few months to see how things are going. The people who are actively processing the request day to day are always the best ones suited to see any friction or hiccups that need adjustments. Do we need to tweak our communication? Do we need to tweak how we're going about, campaigning or something like that? I think asking staff how things are going is always a valuable litmus test for anything new or altered in the workflow. Tends to be the most reliable way to go about it instead of just winging it. So for the recap, again, super new implementation for us. We had some other projects in the pipeline ahead of this one that resulted in a lot of technical troubleshooting. So this project was like a breath of fresh air in comparison. We had hoped to get this moving at the beginning of the summer, but it ended up being an August project. So it's, just now starting to pick up some steam and as we reach out to people. So looking at the upcoming months, I'm continuing to assess the feasibility and effectiveness of the project, address any challenges that crop up, basically refining things as issues are brought to our attention. You can never account for all the angles once something's set in motion, so my approach is often to just be iterative in whatever the project is. The project has a smaller focus scope that still presents its own difficulties, mostly the lack of contact information for a lot of libraries. It would also be nice to expand this program to include other less resourced institutions, as long as we have both the staffing capacity and the shipping funds available. So as we all know, our community is operating on shifting sands. With budget cuts come the loss of opportunities to try things like this. If nothing else, I'm hoping to maintain this service if I can't grow it, but time will tell. If we can grow it, expansion to prison libraries, more rural libraries, that would be that would be a goal for us. Maybe others as we identify them. We would be, we'd want to firmly establish some criteria to guide us in making decisions and adding to the program. So libraries that face constraints in resource availability and system access, those lacking OCLC symbols, for instance, or have fewer databases to access, less staffing, a lower budget. Libraries may not have the same technical or financial infrastructure as our primary partners. That's who we're trying to look for. I haven't pursued this yet, but we could also bring this to our Big Ten consortium and lend freely at a larger scale. So if you have a network you're connected to, that could be an interesting thing to consider. I think most members in our consortium, for instance, could potentially participate. Excluding one or two, given how their charging and costs are set up, it just doesn't align with the rest of us. But I think the majority of us could potentially do this, and it could be similar for you. So for us, the focus is on less resourced institutions and expanding access to our collections. We spend a great deal of time, energy, money on building, housing, and maintaining these resources. We want them to be used and valuable to our research community, which extends beyond our local community in Indiana and our Big Ten consortium. If there's a way to reduce friction and increase access, and we have the capacity to do so, then we want to pursue those possibilities. Hopefully others can use this as a loose guide or inspiration to implement their own version with the list provided. The complexity isn't high. You don't have to pursue an all or nothing approach with this either, so you can start small and simple and then scale up as it makes sense to you. And if you are interested in pursuing this, an easy start is to set up a very basic workflow, add your name to Clemson's tribal library list, and then take anything here that you can use as a launching point, email templates, routing logic, anything. And all of this can serve as an entry point that's pretty low barrier. If you can waive lending fees at the very least, add your contact info to Clemson's list. I mean, people will appreciate it. As with most projects, it really comes down to a question of budget and time. And then a possible roadmap. So if you're interested in implementing something similar, here's the basic roadmap, things we kind of covered already, but you start with the data, you understand your current lending patterns and the financial impact of that. And then you can use this information to build internal support, configure your systems for some specialized processing, and then finally dive into outreach and relationship building. So you have to bear in mind that these are ongoing efforts, so you need to perform them over time. But if you do them in small chunks, you can reach out to a lot of institutions in a short amount of time. I mean, we've just started and we've already had a decent amount of HBCUs respond to us and a few tribal libraries, a few that we've been able to find info for at this point. And for links and references, so the 107 HBCU listing link is good for a comprehensive alphabetical list of HBCUs. The site includes a breakdown of institutions by state, and each school has a direct link to their homepage, which is helpful. There's some asterisk here related to this. So 5 or so of the schools on the list have closed, but they're clearly marked as such. And then others have a single asterisk for schools that aren't recognized by the U.S. Department of Education as an HBCU. Some also have a double asterisk as their schools that aren't currently accredited. There's not too many of those. For our purposes, if the school is listed on the site and not closed, we offer to make an account for them. Most are straightforward. You can find contact information for interlibrary loan departments without too much issue. Some are more difficult than others, but just keep the above in mind and decide whether you want to include schools not recognized by the U.S. Department of Education or schools not accredited, but that are on that website. And the next big link of note is Clemson's working document for tribal libraries. So again, adding yourself to the list is super simple. You find your state, you add your library, your name, your OCLC symbol, and department email. And then tribal libraries are sorted by state. So if they have access to an OCLC symbol, it's listed. So easier starting point, I think, to start with them. The challenge here is most just don't have contact information. So as we work through our project, if we find information, we're going to include it on Clemson's document for everyone. Okay, and that's everything. So I'd love to hear from you. Do you have questions about the implementation? Do you have challenges that you foresee at your institution? Have you already implemented something similar? I have some other discussion prompts if we need a catalyst, but are there other institutions or types of institutions that you would want to include in this type of list with HBCUs and tribal libraries? We're super keen to know. So yeah, let me know.
From online.
Oh, now it's good.
Yep. Okay. So Can everybody online hear us? If you can put something in the chat. Or if, yep, they said yes. Thank you.
Okay, we're all good. All right.
So, does anyone in the room have questions? We'll bring the mic to you.
I actually have, as the mic runner, I actually have a question of my own. So I have, it's a little odd, but because you are doing outreach, has any library been offended by the offer of doing this?
No, we've positioned it as such to not, you know, it's an it's as open and as non-offensive as we could possibly make it, right? Because you don't want to. It's the reason why even internally we were so careful with finding the right name for like access support, as opposed to just looking at an institution and saying you don't have enough money or staff to do this thing, so you need our help, you know. But really, it's just nobody's been upset so far. Hopefully, nobody will, you know, knock on wood. And if they are, I understand. But it's really one of those things where we just want to expand our collection as much as possible, like access to it. And a lot of locations tend to, you know, when you look through the data, they just don't get to even attempt to borrow material from us, or if they do, it's just not, it just can't happen because of financial reasons. And that shouldn't be the barrier to information, right?
Good questions in the room. There was a question online before, but it's already been answered if that was Kate Zadebski's question. Others online, put your question in the Q&A.
There's a few more online. You might have to refresh your screen.
Oh, okay.
I can go ahead and read one from online. From online, it says, I'm wondering about HSI, so Hispanic Serving Institutions. Might they be another type of library that would benefit from a program like this, or are they a different sort of institution?
Good question. I haven't considered, you know, that was part of the reason why I was excited to come today, because you know, we had the initial idea for tribal libraries because of Clemson, and then HBCUs was a list that I knew we could find reliable information quickly, right? Of like, hey, you know, here's a link and here's 100+ institutions. But yeah, HSIs would be an interesting thing to explore as well. Yeah.
Out the room, anyone?
Shall I go for the next question then? I believe this is the next one. What is your process for providing free shipping? Are you including paid labels with the loan that the library has to keep track of?
So right now it's our mailing team's already accustomed to doing this for our books by mail project, and which is just, you know, a similar thing, loaning items across the US to affiliates of ours. And we offer free return shipping. For this, we didn't want to hand a label, partly because it would get lost, right? If they have the material for long spans of time, or if they borrow multiple items and then decide they want to return them all in bulk to us, we wanted flexibility there. So the best we found with our books by mail program was just emailing when we initially sent the item and saying, hey, reach out to us when, and attaching a note and just saying, you know, reach out to us when you're ready and give us the title, give us the weight and of whatever the items are, and we'll email you a thing. So the only real hurdle there, I think, is making sure the communication is there for that, but also, you know, they need to print it, but it's the best way we've been able to do it thus far. And sometimes we've had problems if we send the label with the package and then enough time passes and they still have the label. Sometimes it's bounced back to them for a myriad of different reasons. And we kind of wanted to avoid some of that as well. But time will tell. Hopefully it's equivalent to what it's been with the Books by Mail program.
I have one in the room and I'm making my way over.
thank you. Fantastic presentation. What are your, maybe I missed it, so forgive me. What's your loan period? And if you're reaching out, or you've sent your initial email saying when you're ready to return it, reach out to us for a return label. How long are you waiting to reach out to them if they haven't contacted you to get your materials back?
Right. I mean, we tend to be more flexible than others. So like with the Big Ten, within our consortium, right, we'll do 17 weeks and then one renewal for another 17 weeks. And we've tried to apply that more liberally across other affiliates of ours, if we're able to. So far, we haven't had a huge amount of issues with recalls or anything like that. So I'm thinking going into this, it's going to be roughly that time period of 17 weeks and a renewal for another 17 or so. And probably not needing to recall. I mean, our collections are really large, and usually we have enough, or we have a duplicate or something, so we don't put ourselves in a bind, or someone local needing the material doesn't have to wait this huge amount of time to get it back or anything.
All right, Garrett, another question from online. It's kind of two questions in one. So I imagine your ILL business is brisk as a large university. Is that why you charge generally outside of your more local transactions to begin with? This is a fantastic outreach program for sure, but at my institution, we rarely charge given how many library partners we work with regularly. Our volume is low compared to a large university. Curious if non-charging in general is prohibitive.
Yeah, I mean, mostly just because of how many, it's the request volume, right? Like per staff member, we have a good balance right now. We have some capacity to increase, hence why we're doing something like this. But yeah, in the future, I would love to not have to charge at all, or charge even less than we charge now. Because again, we're not making money on it. It's not a big cornerstone for the library and our finances and how we plan for a fiscal year. So my goal is to try and chip away at it and try and expand it to be free to as many people as possible. But yeah, this is ensuring we don't open the floodgates, right? And that we don't have to, we don't open it up for, everything's waived, everything's free, and then we can't keep up our turnaround time, right? Because that's a big part of our equation. Is every day if we're processing 100 to 200 requests or something like that and fulfilling them, we don't want to delay that anymore. I think right now most of our turnaround time's 6 to 9 days for loans, and same day or 1 to 2 days for article copies, and that's been great. We've been able to maintain that even when we are down a staff member or something. So that's a big factor for us, is just balancing volume and quality of service and how fast we can process things and how fast things can get out to people. We definitely don't want to have an issue where our communication starts to be lax just because we're overwhelmed with things.
Okay, we have time for, I think, about one more or two quick questions. One was, have some libraries offered to enter an agreement instead of having the fees waived?
Oh, like a reciprocal agreement?
I would assume.
So far, no. But again, we just started, so I could see that happening as well. And I would much prefer that, as opposed to an institution getting offended or a tribal library getting offended that we're offering free services to them. So if that would be something we would totally be open for. So if somebody bounced back and said, "Oh no, that's great, but we prefer it to just be a reciprocal agreement," yeah, totally would be happy with that.
Okay, and one last question, and we're at time. I think should be a short answer, but do the tribal libraries already have ILL systems, or are they mostly manually submitting requests to you, for example?
It seems to
in
be
an email?
manually. Some of them are manual. Some of them have access to OCLC symbols. I imagine it's similar to how, like in Indiana, we have the state library, and we have a couple of rural libraries across the state that don't have access to an OCLC symbol otherwise, so they'll use the state library as kind of like the in-betweener that will then communicate with us and request material. So we had some come through like that. And I think out of the 275 tribal libraries, I think there was somewhere, it's a big range, but it was somewhere between like 50 and 80 something libraries had access to an OCLC symbol. So
Okay, good. All right, that ends our session for today. So please, again, complete the post-session survey and use the QR code. To our folks out in virtual land, thank you for joining us. And if you want to talk more about this, you can see our presenter online, and you can check the Q&A and online too also. So thank you all, and go have a break. And we're getting down the line here, day 2. All right, thank you. Thank you, Garrett.